Wanda Smith of Smith Dudley Counseling, therapist and emotional coach. I want to personally welcome and thank you for tuning in to this transparent, vulnerable conversation with Chris and Fred as we discuss untreated childhood trauma, priority setting, and maintaining balance in life. Welcome to a conversation of two males and a female. Today, we're going to be talking about those undersurface elephant in the room conversations that sometimes we don't feel comfortable discussing. With everything that is going, all the uncertainty in the world, there still remains the issues that the issues that we are going through within ourselves and much as other individuals. So we want to make sure that when people are struggling with those life issues, we want to be able to have a conversation about how we overcame some of the things we've done, as well as some deal with some of the things that we'll continue to cope with and deal with on a day-to-day basis. So we want to be honest about what we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis, as well as some of the things that brought light to us on our journey that we were not so comfortable about, but we want to be able to share and express that in a way that we can definitely help others. So, with that being said, welcome, and I want to thank Chris and Fred for participating and joining me in this because I think that we definitely need to be able to share some of those things and discuss some of those things, some of those undersurface issues, and just be have it available from different perspectives because we've all had different journeys, we've all had different walks, and we all have different perspectives on life and how we deal with those things. So and I know I just briefly from my journey, I grew up the oldest of five, four girls, one boy. He was the baby. He developed cerebral palsy at 8 months old due to the uh, vaccination that he had to receive, the 8 month old vaccination. So he developed cerebral palsy from that. And just my dad was an educator. My mom was encouraged to not work and stay at home. So I grew up in a very structured and organized home, and more so learning how to understand different roles was challenging for me because I saw that. So in my adulthood, that was one of the things that I struggled with, because I saw my dad work 2 or 3 jobs and my mom was always the one there at home with us. So that's just a general overview of what my home life was like. So I'm just gonna open up and let Chris or Fred, either one who wants to go first, just kind of give us a general introduction of who you are.
Chris, you want to go first or you want me to go?
Yeah, I'll go first. Um, my background, I come from a church background. My grandfather was a pastor. I'm originally from North Carolina, so I am the baby of 5 siblings. Um, if there's only two of us left now, which is my oldest brother, myself, now, and my mom. Um, my upbringing was interesting because we did a lot of things that was traditional, that was passed on from my mom's parents and their parents and the parents for them. So a lot of it was a lot of tradition. A lot of it was not biblical. I found out that later as I got older into manhood. Um, my childhood was, I was always at church, always participating, always doing things. I didn't get to do a lot of things like normal kids because they just didn't believe that that was right. So I kind of had a little resentment um, in my younger days, even into my teenage days, because it was like, you going to church, it was no questions asked. So a lot of things that I struggled in my adult life, it was just, I think, was just resentment from things that I was deprived as kids. Could not go to dances, could not play cards, couldn't do sleepovers. So kind of interesting. My family, I was the baby. Like I said, I'm the baby of the 5. So all of my brothers and sisters were already grown. So I was kind of like an only child. So It was interesting just having older parents. Never knew my dad. Grew up with my stepfather. All I saw them do was work. So everything that I do now, I got from them, and it has taken me several places in life. But I'm still learning on this journey. So
Okay. All right. And I'm from Phoenix City, Alabama. My mother was an educator, and my father was like a union leader. And then eventually they got a divorce, and my mother got remarried like later on when I was in college, and stayed married to until my stepfather passed. I am the oldest. I have a brother, and then I have an additional sibling through um, my stepfather or my bonus father. So I have additional brothers and sisters through that, and and then also a bonus sister from a relationship with my dad after or during. I don't know which one, but an additional sister, and so we pretty much was like everyone else, a traditional family. My mother was the breadwinner, of course, because basically she raises us as a single mother for the most part. But we went to church. I went to a private Catholic school, K through 8. So I really wanted to be Catholic, and my mother was like, "No, you don't make that decision until you get to be 16." And so she said, "If you want to be Catholic, you're gonna have to do both. You're gonna have to go to the Catholic church, and then you're gonna come back and go to Sunday school and regular church." And so I did that for a number of years. But just really traditional. And as I found out later on, becoming a pastor, that really my family were great people and they were good folks. And as I come to know other folks' family, I was like, oh yeah, we got a real good family compared to some other folks in terms of drama and that kind of stuff. But one of the things that I did find out, that we were really religious in terms of, we just did things traditionally, and we really wasn't quote unquote really spirit led. And a lot of things that we did was because of a certain look, or this is what you're supposed to do and this is how you're supposed to do it. And so it's kind of shaped now the way that I operate now.
Mhm. Okay. So, yeah, I hear both of you all say the religious and the background, the church background, which is something that was instilled in me as well. I actually lived a block away from the church, so we were in the church. We were at church Monday, Wednesday, Saturday, and Sunday. And I always said when I grew up, I wasn't going to church because I had enough of church when I was little. But I think that was the foundation. Well, I know that was the foundation of how my life is being, and I really appreciate that. But a lot of those things too um, that I experienced as a child affected my adult life. And for example, the untreated, some of the untreated childhood trauma that we experience. And I think a lot of the kids today, a lot of the children in the society today miss that foundation we had. Well, miss that, they're not in church and they're not grounded. Even though we were old, we got older, and I want you all to just chime in because we're having a conversation. This not a counseling session, so I'm not doing I'm not doing the counseling. So and I was just gonna say, some of the childhood trauma that we experienced, we've learned to with our foundation, in church. I don't want with our spiritual relationship with God, created a foundation that a lot of kids today don't have. So when they're struggling with making decisions or coping with life issues, they're kind of lost. So even with some of the experience that I had as a child and not having that foundation, I could not imagine not being able to, deal with some of those things. So let's talk about a little bit
Yeah.
of.
Yeah. Well, and it's ironic that you would say that, because it really kind of it moves in about 5 or 6 different directions in terms of what you said, in terms of unpack it. But one of the things was, even though we talked about our background, and it might have been traditional, it might have not been as spiritual as we thought, but there was still what I call an impartation.
Right.
And so, how the Bible talks about trampling a child in the way they should go, so that when they're old, they won't depart from the faith. And so, what winds up happening is we've gotten all this impartation. So, even though we might have strayed, even though we might have had some real issues, we still were able to really pull on something that was inside of us. So, it goes back to what you were saying. If we don't have anything, so you can't make a withdrawal if there's not a deposit. And what has happened is that now, all that Monday, that Wednesday, that Friday, that Sunday, all those different programs that we were going to, they were making deposits in us. And as a result, then later on in life, we were able to make the withdrawals, some of them larger than others, but we had so much in us stored up that we were able to do it. And I think what we've done is that we might have not imparted enough into our children. And so the other thing is, and I'm sure you'll get to it when you start talking about trauma, is that because we have gone through so much as youngsters and young adults, that we say, hey, we're going to protect our children from that. We're going to shield them from that. And so what winds up happening is, so they hadn't had a chance to scrimmage with life, so to speak. I call it life scrimmage. And so what winds up happening is, then when some life-changing events happen, it's very difficult for them to deal with them, because they didn't have a chance to scrimmage. They didn't have a chance to practice. They didn't have a chance to kind of work through some stuff, or do what we call in education a progressive struggle. And so what winds up happening is, now when they're faced with something, if we're not there to kind of help them out, then what winds up happening is, if, say, God doesn't step in and do it, then it becomes even more traumatic for them at older ages. And so, I think as really as leaders now, what we've got to start doing is, whether it be our children, for our grandchildren, or like in a case like me, I'm a pastor or whatever. So I need to make sure that I'm teaching my parishioners that, hey, make sure that you make the right impartation with your children. Make sure that you let them have some productive struggle, so that they can be able to work through issues when they get older.
That's good. Yeah, that's true. And then trying to find that balance, though, is as a parent, though, trying to find a balance as to what you share with them about being honest, how much honesty you give them and how much you don't, because you still have to have that level of respect. Thinking back when I was coming up, when I was told to do it, and not giving an explanation as wise, because I said so. Well, that was it, because I said so, and not giving an explanation. Because for me now, even with my son who's 18, I raised him from a perspective of everything that I didn't receive. So if he needed someone to talk to, he needed some place to be safe, I still had that open door where he could do that, but there still was that line of disciplinary and respect. So most time, though, people don't understand the balance. So you either give them too much, not enough, or there's no thin line between it, and then children even suffer from that, or they miss out. And let's rewind back to, because I'm thinking about when I was little and I had both parents in the household, and there was still the level of dysfunction. There still was a level, and I felt like it at that time. I didn't understand it, but I was the oldest, so my parents were still learning themselves while they was learning how to be a parent. Yeah. You can't go back, and correct it, but you can still have that conversation. But a lot of times people don't have that conversation to say, well, this is what I was going through, at that time. So in that trauma and how it affects us as adults, we never were taught to be able to express the trauma or the things that we were dealing with. We were just told to deal with it, suppress it, and or let me say this, or were we taught to do that, or was that something misunderstood, or was that an underlying understand something that was understood, I'm sorry, that we just didn't talk about it? Like now, and I'm saying society today, we're encouraged to express our feelings, to talk about things, to go talk to someone. But when we were coming up, when I was coming up, it wasn't encouraged to go and be able to express your feelings or express your emotions. And is that something that caused the adult, like, I don't want to say issues, but I want to call it the challenges that we have today as adults, as we relate to individuals, as we relate to selecting our careers, as we, our relationships, professional and personal. Is that something that caused us to not be able to be open in developing healthy relationships as adults?
You know what, Chris? I want you to answer this, Chris. In Alabama, we had, and I don't know if y'all are like this in North Carolina, but in Alabama, we had this saying: "What happens in the house stays in the house," and
Yes,
you
sir.
better
Yes,
not.
sir.
If somebody's killing somebody in there, you better not whisper a word. So I know that's how it was for us in the deep South in Alabama. Did y'all have that same kind of thought process in your community?
Yes, sir. What was interesting is like if I it, it was looked upon if I felt a certain way and I wanted to vocally express that to my mom, it was more so disrespectful because they were the authoritative figure and because they were the parents and I was the child or teenager or young adult. I didn't have, if I said, well, I don't really agree with this, and it was like, no, this is what you're going to do. Prime example, I dated my oldest daughter, my first wife. I dated her through like our teens, high school, and she got pregnant. Well, back in the day, they just say, you get pregnant, you get married, and I was so dead against it. And it was like, well, what am I going to do? Because these are my parents. And I felt so much pressure. And then when they actually took us to the courthouse in Dillon, South Carolina, no, Bennetville, South Carolina. And when I got married, I knew I had made a mistake. I absolutely knew I had made a mistake. But going back to what you were saying about the impartation, everything that my parents, my grandparents had poured into me, that was my core. So of course, I'm going to do because I'm just that kind of guy. I'm going to take care of my responsibility, even though I'm not prepared for it, nor did I agree to it. But I felt like I just had to do that because that was what my mama did. And my mom and my dad, which I never met, their parent, my grandfather and his father had actually arranged the actual marriage. So she didn't even have a say so in who she married. She just, hey, this is your husband. And 5 kids later, 25 years of marriage, I met him one time, you know what I'm saying? So I totally get it. So for me, it was more so, hell, if I felt a certain way, why you feel that way? You're at my house, you go by my rules. And if I felt like if I want to express something to them that I didn't agree with or how I felt, then it was like I was being disrespectful and I needed to get out the house.
Yeah. Now, when he touched on something that, struck a thought in my mind about, and you mentioned it too, about having two parents in the home and it being dysfunctional. He was talking about perhaps not seeing his parents or whatever. And I remember my natural father, even though he was there, he wasn't there, and so sometimes you can be there and not be present. And so that's one of the things that I try to struggle with. And I try to kind of, because he wasn't the best provider. I mean, he was a nice guy, but he wasn't the best provider. And so wasn't there, was just kind of absent and aloof. And so that's one of the things that I try to do as a husband and as a father. I try to make sure I provide. So now one of the things that I'm challenged with is making sure that I find the balance, that I don't go overboard trying to make sure that I'm the provider, making sure that, everything, whatever you need, you've got it right here. And so sometimes your childhood can get you out of balance because you saw something, you say, you know what, I'm not going to do that. And it goes back to what Chris was saying, you know what, no, I'm not going to be absent. So I'm going to quote unquote do the right thing and I'm going to be there. And so even to today, now being 50 plus, I'm saying, oh, you know what, I'm going to make sure that I'm going to be a provider. If I don't do nothing else, I'm going to make sure I provide, but I have to be careful that I don't get out of balance and in chasing the bag to make sure I secure the home and not really giving home what they really need. And that might be the presence instead of the present.
Right, right. Yes. But how do you find that balance? Like for a woman, I guess it is totally different because a woman becomes over um I'm going to call it the superwoman syndrome,
Mhm.
where you have to be the mom. If you in nowadays you have to, we're expected to work outside the home. It's unheard of now, but working outside of the home, mother to the kids, you build, wife, and making sure that those things are organized and structured in a way, and then finding time to take care of yourself. And what I mean by that is having that balance. How do you find that balance if you don't know you even need the balance? Because if you grew up watching someone who, like you said, provide and worked all the time to provide and don't even know that's why you're irritated and that's why you're quick, 0 to 100 real quick. And how do you even recognize that that's what I need to get away. I need to, take a break from it and step away from it. So not even knowing that that's the cause of the confusion, how do you even find a balance? Like, what would you do or to identify that I need a balance or what a balance is? Because many people don't even know that a balance exists. So, like I said, for me, overcoming it, I had to get to the point where I just kind of like was forced to have the balance, to find the balance, because I didn't understand why I was irritated, why I was confused. And a lot of times I think when you grow up, for like I did, being the oldest, and I'll say this, there's a difference between who you are and then the image you're taught to be. So I felt like the image that I was taught to be was not the image of who I was. So that right there alone was caused a lot of, I bumped heads a lot with myself. So when I realized that was the cause of me trying to find a balance of who I was, because I'm struggling with the image that I was told to be, and then the image of who I was. So like I said, that forced me to, start reading books and started doing the work on myself, But sometimes when people don't have that a long time, and it was that point was when I was a flight attendant, when I spent a lot of time in the hotel's room alone. So I had the opportunity to do that. That was the start of it. But if you're working every day and you're coming home, and I'm saying this from a woman's perspective, you're working every day, you're coming home, you're having to cook, you're having to make sure the kids have everything. And we're going to be honest, most of the time that does fall on the woman, because the man doesn't communicate as to the woman what his responsibilities are, or what his feelings are, what his thoughts are. So that creates a blockage in itself, because nobody, you're doing what you're doing, and both are saying, well, she should understand and see that I'm providing. He should understand and see that I'm taking care of the house. So that causes a void in itself. So for you, as each one of you all, how did you find that balance? Or if you're still trying to find that balance, what has been the pull, and what was guided you to find a balance? And if you're still struggling with trying to find a balance, what is that pull, that motivation to the balance?
Chris, I'll let you go first.
Um, for me, it was the pandemic. I think when we did our group session back in July, I had been going so long and just working. And I'm guilty of saying, yes, I provide. Yes, I pay the bills. Yes, blah, 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 blah. And I think it took the pandemic and then the reoccurrence of my wife's cancer And I think that the pandemic allowed all of us to kind of come to abruptly, like just a stop. And then when I actually had the time to stop, I I felt all this enormous, just all kinds of stuff going through my mind. I was feeling all, just stuff that I would push through, like on my day to day or week to week. It started to bother me. So after having the group session, I decided to reach out and continue doing the therapy sessions, and then I realized that I had just kind of just crashed and burned, man. I was just kind of walking around just in a daze. And so the therapy allowed me to just kind of unpackage this whole package, man. I really didn't realize how much I have neglected myself and how much I had, I won't say so much fail as a father or a husband, but just missed opportunities. You know what I'm saying? Because I was always chasing the bag. I never stopped to just enjoy the victories. I felt like if I achieve something, okay, that's great. Now let me go get some more. And then seeing my wife go through this terminal disease now, man, it's just really just put a lot of things in perspective, and I have so much time to reflect on. It's kind of like watching a movie, and you just going back and just thinking about, oh man, I missed that. Oh, it's really eye opening for me. Um, daily, I am overwhelmed because at the end of the day, man, I am who God called me to be, and he knew I would be at this point at this time. He knew that I would have my shortcomings. He knew I was going to not miss that mark, or I did something that I could have did better, man. So I think for me was just, the pandemic was a blessing for me. It really was a blessing for me because it really opened my eyes to really appreciate the small things as well as appreciate myself. I never ever have appreciated myself. I've always, kind of put myself on the back burner. And I think that the therapy really has helped me to get to a point where I value me, and it's okay when I feel a certain way. I don't have to be uptight. I can just express it and say, hey, I'm not comfortable with this, or this doesn't feel good to me. And then control what I can control. What I can't control, I kind of like, so if I have a list of 10 things and only 7 of those things I can't control, just swipe them to the left and deal with what I can do. And that's kind of helped me to do what I need to do and get through this journey that I'm on now. So I would say for me would be the pandemic.
Both of you said some really profound things, and you've taken my responses, so I can just just throw it in. But the first thing was the one that said that she really mentioned about educating yourself. And so that's one of the things that I've tried to do to establish that. So, and it's a daily walk. I mean, it's always, it's ever evolving. And so, reading self-help books, reading the word, listening to, different preachers, listening to different motivational speakers, sessions like this, iron sharpening iron, having great conversations with people who understand and operate in wisdom. And so those are some of the ways that I've been able to kind of glean and really understand how to start establishing that balance. But then I think the other thing is communication, is making sure that you articulate to people, like saying, hey, no, I can't do this because I already have too much on the plate. Or, hey, look, I need to take some time to do this, or I need to take off, or I need to go and play golf, or I need to go and work out, or I need to just go and sit down and do nothing, or let me just binge watch some television or whatever, but let me, articulate that to whomever that I'm responsible to at that particular time, whether it be work or whether it be home or whatever the case may be. But I think educating yourself and being able to really communicate, I think those are the two ways that I've kind of learned to be able to do it. I never forget when I was a young preacher, Fred Price, Pastor Price came to our church, and I was always the guy that would, I was the pastor's adjunct. So I really was very fortunate because, I mean, a lot of mighty men and women of God, I've been able to kind of sit at their feet almost because I'm waiting on them. And so, we just having these, what you would think to be random conversations, but really they're divine conversations. And I never forget, I asked Pastor Price, I said, how have you been so relevant for so long, and how do you continue to do what you do? And I said, what's your strategy? What are you? And in his voice and how he does, well, I don't have a strategy. I just do what God calls me to do. That's what I do, And he said, but one thing that I do, and he said that he and Betty, they would take a vacation every quarter. He said, regardless of what he was doing, he said he retreated and he would take a vacation every quarter. And so me, over spiritualizing things, of course, I went right to the word. And I thought about it. Every time Jesus worked a mighty miracle, what did he do? He went and he was off to himself. He was off to himself. And so I think we have to find a way, and that's one of the things that I'm working on. How do I find a way to recharge without alienating those that I'm connected to? And so that's one of the things that we have to do. And I want to revisit something that I think is really important that I've really been working on. I think you mentioned the one where, we have different roles in the household. And so as I'm counseling different people for marriage, I say, hey, don't let someone dictate your roles. So you may be the female and you love gardening, you love, doing the lawn and everything else. And the husband may love to cook. He may be a chef. He may just be, a grill master, and he just loves to cook. So if that's the case, then that's great. If y'all want to, change the roles up, that's fine. Don't let somebody dictate that, but y'all got to communicate and know what it is. But one of the things that I'm working on and I try to work on is just because you are the provider doesn't necessarily mean that you can't help at home.
Right.
If that makes sense. Because sometimes what winds up happening is, you can get in this place like, well, I'm gonna come and sit down like I'm the king and you serve me because I've been, I'm the money earner. But if you got a wife that works too, well, she's bringing something to the table too. And so you expect her to work and you expect her to do all the things that, that are supposed to be done around the house. And and yours may be minimal. So, finding a way so that's another piece of balance that you have to have. How do I make sure that I balance roles in the household and I could go on to the school, to the workplace or whatever, finding balance in that manner. So I think making sure that balance is not just one dimensional, making sure that it's 360, that I have balance in every area of my life. And I think once you do that, because once you unbalance in one area, it tends to spill over in other areas.
That's true. Yes, and then you have to, like, before it relate when you talk about relationships and especially in the household with spouses, the other spouse has to be willing to, and you have to, I think to a lot, and I'm gonna say this, the majority of people who are married today, I was having a conversation with my mom recently, and my question to her was, how did my dad last 40 plus years? And mine was 16 years. So I was asking a question because I wanted to know, did I give up too soon, or did I, what was something, I was just evaluating my marriage from, not necessarily comparing it, but measuring it to what I could have done differently and so forth. And her statement to me was, your generation don't get married for the right reasons. And I said, what was the right reasons? The right reasons is because she said when her and my dad got together, they were basically getting together, they were building together. There was unconditional love. And for my generation, she says, this is her opinion based on what she's observed, is that majority of us get together for convenience, status, you know, what that person can get, how that person can benefit me, my situation, or whatever. So, and when you build a marriage and relationship on and it's not founded, it's not on a foundation, you're gonna not your marriage is not gonna have that balance. And balance will, I'm gonna say respect, to be able to to listen to that person need, or to, you know, to honor that person and be willing to make those adjustments necessarily when there is an unbalanced, to be balanced. So I think for us to, you know, and I probably rushed into the relation talking about the status and being married and looking for mates to not fulfill the marriage as a union, but also marrying for to fill the void the individual is missing. So sometimes we draw and we attract people who are hurt and wounded and dealing with some stuff that we have not dealt with within ourselves. And that only makes the relationship worse when we're not able to openly communicate in a healthy manner, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
It
So,
does.
so with that too, and that brings me to um, a question that I'm going to present about men not being able to understand what it is that they want. And not to say women don't, not, you know, women don't have this problem either, because they do. But I'm statistically, there are more men who are over the age of 40 who have not been able to commit in relationships. And it's nothing that hadn't changed. And I'm gonna say this, it hasn't changed for as men having more 2 or 3 women. And if it has, let me know. But I'm saying for us, the commitment of allowing a woman to be, let me say it like this: more women are chasing men, and more men are not committed in relationships to one woman. Is that becoming the new norm, or is that something that was already established and I just was not aware of it?
It was already established.
Okay.
It was already established. I mean, you look at it, it was already established. You go all the way back. I know, at least in the African American community, I mean, you go all the way back to slavery days. I mean, you know, you think about it, that they basically separated families for the most part, and they only gave them permission to get married when you think about it. And so they basically just bred folks. So you think about it. So what is happening is I'd have been part of the spirit of breeding, so to speak. So okay, I breed and have children,
Mhm.
but realistically, I'm not fathering them. You know why? Because the master is the father. He
Okay.
provides for them. He tells them what to do. He sets the order. He sets the structure. And so what winds up happening is then we have this spirit running rampant that, hey, we get to sow seed, but then there's no responsibility of the structure and being the head. And so now you take that all the way from slavery up to today. And so that's you know, part of the
Mindset, huh?
challenge that you have. Yeah.
That's a mindset. And in our lifetime, do you think that we will be able to address that mindset? I mean, when I say address it, I'm saying start to change and transition into um, healing that wound.
Yeah, I think so. Go ahead, Chris. I know you were going to say something.
I think so. But again, it's got to start at home. You know, we're experiencing now more young parents,
Mhm.
now more so than ever. You know, kids are starting to be sexually active in grade school and junior high school, and sometimes when they graduate, they got like 2 kids and stuff. And so I think it's got to start at home. Um, I think the core values um, of what a family or the family structure is, just it's all screwed up. Because now think about it, back in the day we didn't have social media. We didn't have, I mean, we had, if you had a beeper, or you were good, two-way pager. But now you got everything you want is at your fingertips. It's about likes, shares, everything is on, everything goes at this point. You know what I'm saying? So I think that it could change, but it has to, it honestly has to start at home. And now, we don't really have real fathers anymore. We have a lot of like donors, and I think that's why I think the women now kind of, the roles have reversed, where the women are chasing the men, because now it's kind of like, well, I can have my cake and eat it too, and go over here and go over there. But I think that's just a generation, and it's just a domino effect, because of course it's unbalanced. So if you're unbalanced on one side, it's going to be unbalanced on the other side. And then now you got your kids having kids, and then they're growing up, and then it's just a domino effect.
And so you don't have a model. So if you don't have proper models, then you don't know what that looks like. So you don't know what being monogamous looks like. You don't know what making sure that you're not practicing adultery or whatever. If you don't have a model for that, if all you see is that, then you establish that as the norm, as opposed to saying, hey, no, that's not right. That's not what you're supposed to do. That's not how you're supposed to do it.
Right.
And I'll tell you, just from my vantage point, I've always tried to pride myself, when I was in high school and college, of being the nice guy and trying to make sure that I keep one girlfriend and so forth and so on. And it always worked. But, trying to do that. But one of the things, and then I would use it as an excuse. But the very time that, I become really vulnerable and say, you know what, oh man, I'm all in. I love this girl. I'm just, and then that's the one time where you get dusted off, so to speak. And then you say, oh, see there, the one time I did it. But if someone had sat down and said, but think about how many times you've been that person on the other side. How many times have you really destroyed and crushed someone's heart on the other side?
Right.
If someone had to the side and said, so don't give up on love. Don't give up on, being monogamous. Don't give up on having one mate and being in love and so forth and so on. If someone had told me that in the barbershop or wherever it is that we get our, what I call bootleg counseling, then that would be the case.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yes. And so the conversations that you had, can you a conversation that you had with a male and when you were younger?
Well, my conversation, the conversations that I had with a lot of mentors they were great community guys. You know what I mean? They were community activists. I mean, they were civil rights folks. They were educators. They were phenomenal folks, but they were lousy in terms of their morality. I mean, and it was crazy that you could have so much integrity and morality in terms of civil rights, but then on the other side, in terms of human rights, you were terrible, because guess what? If you violate or if you mistreated folks and were unfaithful and all that kind of stuff, if that's how you roll it, then you're not necessarily, providing the best example. But they would say like, well, hey, man, I don't do this, I don't do that, but this just this. So, just whatever you do, just make sure you take care of home, or make sure you don't. And so they would give you this kind of, halfway kind of counsel. So in other words, they were giving you this license. But I think the reason why they were given the license was because, kind of like what you mentioned earlier, Wanda, about, how our parents, you said, don't do as I do, you do as I say. And so they didn't want to have to deal with the issue of you saying, well, hey, man, you telling me to make sure I go home, make sure I'm, attending the house, make sure I'm not out, and about. you telling me to do this, but you're not doing it. And so to avoid that, then what they would do is they would just say, no, I'm just kind of hands off, and hey, you make your own decision, and you do what you're going to do. But that was the conversation. The conversation would always be like, hey man, get out and sow your oats, and don't get tied down, make sure, man, that in other words, you got the ability to pick whoever you want to pick. And then when you pick whoever you want to pick, you go from there. And so that was always the conversation for me.
I agree. I agree with you. By being the youngest, all of my excuse me, I had two brothers that were in the military. My brother that was next to me, he was an athlete, so he was well known in Durham, North Carolina. All the women, popularity. My sister, she knew everybody. So the conversations with my brothers, it was almost like a disconnect because they were kind of like my oldest brother. He was in Vietnam when I probably one or two, and then I had another brother who was on drugs real bad and alcohol real bad, running the streets. And then my brother next to me was a womanizer. So I always would look at them and be like, okay, those are my brothers, but there was really no connection, as far as like, I knew that they were providers. I knew that they were men, but as far as to have a model to say, okay, this is my younger brother, we're going to make sure you're good. It was more so, I kind of had to get the tidbits, so since my brother next to me, we were the closest. It was 13 years between us. So he would bring me over to the house to kind of give me a break from my mom. And then I had a chance to kind of be a teenager. And then he would tell me things about life, about girls and protecting myself. And, if you're going to do this, there, because he had multiple women. But even with those conversations, that just wasn't part of my DNA, So even at a young age, when I started dating, I tried to be like, like my brothers, but that wasn't me. So I figured out then at an early age that I got to be Chris. So it started like when I was 13, 14, I was like, well, I'm not that person. I didn't have a relationship with my dad. So I knew at a younger age that I was going to be that dad that would be in my kid's life, preferably with me and not away from me. When I went to church, I was going to not, church was a foundation for my kids, but I was going to go about it a different way to not let it be so pressing, but teach them the importance of having a relationship with God. So, that's how I kind of got into my manhood. I really didn't have a blueprint, but the one thing that has helped me to this point was my integrity and the wisdom that I got from my grandparents. So even with what I did not get from my brothers or my uncles, I just held on to the wisdom and the word. And that's what actually that's how I've got to this point. Yes, have I made some mistakes? Absolutely. Made a whole lot of mistakes. But as far as integrity wise, man, I've always been the same since 12, 13 years old. So that's my recollection of just having relationships with my brothers.
Well, see, the reason why I brought that up, because I was like Chris too. I was an observer, so I was always around the grown folks. I didn't really hang with the kids that much, and I used to hear what they say and tell me what to do. But I always watched what they did, so that was confusing to me. You tell me one thing, but you do another. So I set up in my mind a long time ago that I was not going to allow them to be an example, because they don't do I can't trust them. I couldn't trust that. And so that's why I brought that up, because I wanted to give light to sometimes the conversations that we have from grown people were not good, good examples. I mean, were not good advice, because, and then a lot of times as I got older, I realized that they were still dealing with their own stuff. They were still
Right.
their issues too.
Right.
And And the thing about that too, I think about this often, if they had been honest, because I never had a real hard conversation with my dad, and I said adult conversation. And it was one, I think I was a junior in college and he was on the back porch. I pulled up and he was cutting grass and he was drinking a beer and he asked me, "You want a beer?" And I was like, I felt like the world had just, because I was always walking on eggshells with him and always seeking his approval. And so the moment he offered me that beer and he, sit on the back porch with my dad drinking the beer, I thought that was the bomb. And he started to be honest with me, but I often wonder if he had a shared some of those things in younger, when he was younger. I'm saying when I was younger, if he had been honest about some of his challenges, would that had made a difference? And I don't think it probably would have, because he wouldn't have known how to even express that anyway, because he had to
Right.
grow and he had to mature into the man, to become into the man he was. So it wouldn't have been, it happened when it needed to happen.
Well, you know what? But I'll add something to that on the flip side,
Okay.
because man, I've done everything up under the sun. I promise you, if it could be done, I've done it. And so, but I'm really careful about my daughter who's 25. I'm not going to share certain things with her. You know why? Because I don't know if you're mature enough to handle that.
Okay.
Number one, are you mature enough to handle the mistakes that I made? Are you going to now view me differently?
Okay.
That's the first thing. And then number two, are you going to say, oh, well, shoot, you made all these mistakes, then hey, and you turned out all right. So let me go ahead and just kick it. And then by osmosis, I'll get there. And so I think there's a balance. You have to find a balance of how do you, and I think my wife, she does a great job of that, of how do you share some of your mistakes and get and really be able to really counsel, whether it be your children or whether it be your co-workers, relatives, or whatever. How do you, or just people that are younger, they don't have to be younger, they can be folks that's older than you, but how do you share things with them without compromising? And you can't control how people think, but how do you do that in such a manner that it doesn't taint your ability to continue to speak into their lives, if that makes sense?
Yes, that makes a whole lot of sense.
Because so a lot of it is not based on our maturity as the imparter. It's a lot of it has to do with the people that you're imparting to. You have to do a real evaluation of them and say, hey, can they handle that? And so I would submit to you that your dad at that point in time, he said, okay, you know what? She can handle now me telling her to have a seat and have a beer.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and I can understand that too. I could definitely understand that.
He
So
probably saw something in you.
yeah, yeah, because he was completely at that point. He started to be completely transparent and vulnerable about, because see, we both went to Alabama A&M, so he started telling me some stuff. Yeah, he did on the hill, and I was like, "Woo, okay." So yes, and I definitely could handle it. So yeah, and I didn't do that. I didn't say, "Oh, he got through it. I do it." I was like, because he would tell me why not to do it, and I'd be like, "Okay." And see, that's the thing. I've always been able to learn from other people's mistakes. Sometimes there are mistakes that you have to make on your own. Lord knows I've made those, my share. But I can, like I said, I've always been an observer, so I can learn from other people's mistakes. And one of those, I can say that, like if I saw somebody um smoking weed, not to say that I didn't try that, but I knew that if it was something addictive, like if it's cocaine, if I saw somebody do cocaine, they got addicted, then I was like, no, I can't, I'm not going to do that. And I'm not going to do it because I saw how their life changed, how the addiction affected their job, their career, their family. So, I was always aware. Like I've always been an observer, and I've always wanted to be around the grown folks. I don't know what that was about, but that was me. And I wanted, if you all could share too, when was that moment when you felt a breakthrough, when you felt, because we grow up and we have our idea of what our life was supposed to be, how we parented to be, and we have these goals that we set. But when was that moment, if you can remember the moment when you said, you know what, I'm going to completely just engage in the moment and enjoy the life. And I know we're spiritual. We all believers and we have a connection with God. But and I want to say, I guess when you surrender it to Him and found that peace within yourself, to be free from people, to be free from money, to be free from all those materialistic things that we so forth seek, thinking that those things will bring peace and bring fulfillment to us. So if you could think, when was that moment when you start to realize, you know what, this life right here, the materialistic life is not filling the void, is not allowing me to have the internal peace that I know exists or I feel like exists. From that moment when you realize I'm gonna pursue that and not pursue those other things that we so often pursue.
Go ahead, Chris. I'll let you. I'll let you do all the difficult stuff first.
Yes, sir. I would probably say now. After again going back to the group therapy, that was my aha moment. And honestly, Mr. Fred, after we had our group session, I was like, my wife said, you know what, you probably need to, continue this. And I was like, I don't need to talk to nobody, not knowingly, with just losing my brother, my sister-in-law, and my nephew, like within 30 days, and then my wife getting re-diagnosed with cancer. And I kind of was just like going through the motions. And it's crazy because we would sit, because LaWanda every week she would say, okay, Chris, I need you to do this. I need you to do this. And I'll be like, okay, I'm listening to her. And I was like, I don't, still in kind of denial. But then as we started to, like every week, we just kept getting deeper and deeper. And it was just like, wow. And then I realized, like, you know what? I've been going by this the things that I yet to not address. That's what I needed to address. And once I started addressing them, Fred, man, it was like taking clothes off. It was just a relief. And then as I started discovering one thing, the next week I'd be like, oh, wow, I'm finding something else new that I never knew that was there. So I think for me, it was just continuing doing the therapy, and the therapy has helped me so much that, like, it actually gets me through the week. It allows me to have an outlet where I can just output. And then once it's out, then I'm able to look at the pieces on the table and start putting the puzzle back together, man. So I would actually say it was just during the pandemic, after our group session, I really, really, truly, you guys were amazing. And I just felt like it was a pull, and it's been a blessing, and it's continued to bless me. So I would say just after the group therapy for me.
Yeah. So I think we're on the same page, because I would say I still haven't gotten there yet. I mean, I'll just be real honest. I hadn't gotten there yet. I mean, and so for me, Chris, you say about the output, I think every Sunday is my fair, because, I got to be transparent. I got to share. And a lot of times when I'm preaching to myself. And
Wow.
I tell you all the time, I don't practice what I preach what I practice.
That's
And
good.
so, and that's a big difference. And so, getting to a point of when do you get to that point? I don't know if I'll ever get to that point now where I realize that. So the point that I will say is, when I started to realize that, hey, you need to be more intentional about this. You need to look at this. You need to look at this. Hey, man, you so concerned about what people think about you. You so concerned about the image. You so concerned about getting the things. Now, I would say that probably maybe I would say, like, right when I got ready to retire, maybe 2016, and I had, had been married for a minute, I could, start to see, And so sometimes that's why, when you have a mate, the mate sometimes will help you. And I'll give you an example. Like for me, I had to always be in the box when we go to a game. Well, she's like, I don't want to be in the box. I want to be outside. I want to be with the people. I want to, and so now it's like, well, okay. So that wasn't impressive to her. But for me, that was because I wanted to be with the movers and shakers. I wanted to keep working. I wanted to, she was like, no, we're going to a ball game to support our, and so that's just one example. So I think, making sure also that your partner is someone that can kind of help you realize a lot of issues. There's a lot of times there's some stuff she tell me that I don't really like, but it's just good nourishment for my body and I'm saying my spirit man. And so I think for me, I'm still working through that. And every day I get a new revelation, which is great. And I continue to just strive for it to get to that point where I can say at the very end that, okay, boom, I finally got it. And when I say I finally got it, that's probably when I'm gonna leave here.
Okay, that's good. Well, I just wanted to share this too. I think for me was when, okay, let me say this. Years ago, when I was sold out, going to church and studying and building my relationship, and I think it was like 1998 when I first left as a flight attendant. And remember I said earlier where I would go to the room, I've spent a lot of time in the hotel's room where I studied, and I was so focused, but I was not around people. So the things that I had learned, they weren't applied. And what that means was it's just like in school, how we learn, you can read all the books, but you have to pass the test to get the degree. Well, I was so isolated and I was withdrawn from people that I could study, yeah, and I could, and I knew it, but it was never tested. And so when I got to the opportunity to really test it was 3 years ago when I was going through my divorce, when I had to be really alone. And that thing about being alone and lonely is real, because there was a point in my life where I was really alone. I felt like I was alone, but then I had people around me, but I still was alone within. So that was the pressure point for me, because there were many nights when I would say, I did everything right. Why is this happening to me? And so I had to realize and release. I had to really, when I always say this about control, releasing the control, I was always trying to control the outcome in everything that I would do in my everyday life. So that was the point. That was the time in my life when I really was not in control anymore, for real. So I had to really surrender and trust God with everything, in the bad, the good, the ugly, and the sad. And it was a pressure moment for me. So since that experience, each moment and each thing that I do now, I've always go back to that point where I have to say, what can I control? What I can't control? And that knowing that whatever that I can control, I just do it, and be intentional about every day about stepping outside of the familiar and into the unfamiliar, knowing that what I can control is what I can control, and what I can't is what I can't. And that brings me peace, because things going to happen in our lives each and every day, but if we try to control the outcome or control everything that we do, that's when we stay confused and frustrated and so forth. So for me, it's being intentional every day. I try to do something every day outside of my comfort zone. However, when I hear from God, like I hear from him, and he'll wake me up sometimes and he'll tell me to do something. And I'd be like, I'd be like, no. Like my Wednesday wisdoms, when he told me to record them because he know I don't like to be in front of people. And when he told me to do this, because I don't like to be in front of people, I like to be in my little lane, in my corner, in private. That's me. But just knowing that what he tells me to do is not about me. So basically, I'm learning to just remove me and allow him to use me and make it about him instead of about me. And that, just like I said, just being intentional every day about growing into purpose. So,
over in Daniel chapter 10, when Daniel meets the angel that talks to him about, hey, I heard your request, and so I came down, but I was upheld by the prince of Persia. Well, before he shows up, if you look in Daniel 10, it was some people that was with Daniel, but they left because they were afraid. And one of the things when I'm teaching that, one of the things that I talk about, that God will typically show you your vision in solitude.
Mm-hmm.
And so what wound up happening is when the folks left, that's when the angel started talking to them. And so a lot of times we'll be in solitude when we receive everything. You think about John, when he was on the island of Patmos, that's when he gets revelation and he writes revelation. Man, that's some serious stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times what winds up happening is we're able to really give our undivided attention when we're in this sense of solitude. And so we're able to really receive. And I think that happens. But I think one of the things that you said that I think is really important, and that's what I'm learning too, is to be intentional about allowing yourself to be uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's one thing to be intentional about certain things that you can kind of control,
Mm-hmm.
but it's another thing to be intentional about allowing yourself to be uncomfortable. And I think once you do that, number one, it makes you dependent upon God. And number two, it puts you in a growth mindset where you know that, you know what, from whatever I'm getting ready to do with this uncomfortable situation, I'm not going to do anything but grow.
Right, right.
Amen.
Okay. Any closing remarks? Any thing that you all want to add before we close out?
I think this has been pretty good tonight. Mr. Fred, you know, I love hearing you talk, man. I didn't know you was a pastor, but I love hearing you talk. I love the wisdom, and I appreciate the opportunity to sit with you guys tonight, just to talk and, you know, and just absorb and learn and continue to just be better as a person and a man of God.
Well, no, but well, I appreciate LaWanda, you bringing us together, and the thing about it is what I really love about, you know, kind of sharing time with you guys is just this sense of humbleness and transparency. And so truly iron sharpeneth iron. And so because I'm talking all the time, whether it be at work or church, but believe it or not, I do listen and I do glean a lot from y'all. And so I think, you know, having sessions like this, what winds up happening is when you're in a leadership position, sometimes you're so used to being the alpha and you're always, you know, sowing, but you never receive. And
Amen.
so what I have learned, and part of that is, you know, having conversations with you guys is how do I receive and now take that and incorporate it. So a lot of stuff that you hear is really what you've sown into my spirit. And then I've just, you know, and I'm just giving it back out. And I think that's the key. And so I appreciate one of the invitation to kind of even be a part of this. Um, I know you could have just chosen anyone to do that, but to trust us enough to, you know, Chris and I enough to, you know, be somewhat vulnerable, but at the same time, really talk about some things that will be a help to whomever may be watching this. So I don't know what platform you'll put it on, but I'm gonna do a shameless plug. I want them to like it and share it, like it, like it, and share it, and hope blessings to other folks.
Amen.
And so I just want to thank you all both for accepting the invitation. And I was trying my best not to be the counselor, LaWanda, because I think it's very important to have open and transparent and vulnerability is very important conversations and discussions. When we have wisdom, we got to bring up more of that together, because you're right, we have to sharpen iron, has to sharpen iron in order for us to grow and be better. So I appreciate you both. If you enjoyed this conversation, be sure to subscribe so you're notified when our next conversation is posted. Review, like, and share with your friends. This conversation is life changing. I hope after listening to our conversation, you learned some great information and that you are excited about maintaining balance in your life. Remember, God can and He will, but you must. Until next time, you stay focused.